Καλησπέρα σας και πάλι.
Hello again. We are back for the fifth chapter. Now, I have the pleasure to announce the following panel discussion on climate crisis, energy transition, and food production. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Despoina Paliarouta, Secretary General for Energy and Mineral Resources. Hello. Dr. Constantinos Cartalis, Professor of Environmental and Climate Physics at the National Kapodistrian University of Athens. Hello. Dr. George Zalidis, Professor Emeritus at the Aristotle University and Scientific Director of the i-BEC. Dr. Dimitrios, Senior Advisor Europe, Oath BIOME. And this panel will be moderated, my dear colleague, Mr. Sotiris Polisos, General Manager of TRT News. And of course, Mr. Yannis Balakakis, the Chair of the AgriBusiness Forum. Let's start now with the fifth chapter, which is the penultimate chapter of the day. It is a chapter that will discuss climate crisis, energy transition, and the impact of those combined aspects on food production. You have already heard by Ms. Zachioti who the speakers of the panel will be. And I would also like to say that it is a privilege for me to have on the other side of the panel my fellow moderator, Sotiris Polisos, with whom we share a deep love that started in October 2025 in Larissa. I must say that ever since we have been sharing a very unique relation. I have been deeply impressed by his work, the way in which he accomplishes his tasks. And given that sometimes we focus on broadcasters and so on and so forth, but I must say that Sotiris is a person that I really cannot have enough of. Well, you do realize that he raises the bar extremely high for me to keep up your expectations. Please bear with me. Well, my dear Sotiris, I believe that you are the heart and soul for this panel discussion, so you have the floor. In order for you to open the floor for our panelists, two of the panelists did not make it. We do not have Dr. Sayi from Israel with us. As we heard yesterday, Israeli speakers were unable to fly because the fire has closed, as well as Ms. Kulura from Decagro. And she has sent a video recorded message because she had to be at Kavala, at their factory, because she had some procedures to attend to. Now, having said that, Sotiris, you have the floor. Okay, now, you know how things are going. We will have a first statement by the panelists in order to have an overview of our panelists, and then we will have the opportunity, and by we, I'm not talking only about myself and Mr. Balakakis, I'm talking about you as well, to shape an interesting discussion and exchange. Now, I would like to start with Mr. Dimitrios Drisis, who is a Senior Advisor Europe for Oath BIOME Company. We would like to listen from you what Oath does, because they operate in the fields of the environment and the best ways to manage an aging environment. Kindly use the microphone. We need the microphone because this event is being recorded, because at the end of the day, we will use this material for the videos and the conclusions. The speaker's microphone is still off, I'm afraid, and therefore we cannot translate. I have been living abroad for the past 25 years, and I frequently attend various conferences and panels, so it's the first time after 22 years that I can participate in a conference speaking in my mother tongue, so please bear with me because I might have forgotten some of the Greek terminology. The past 2 days have been quite interesting. We listened to representatives from the academia, from public utilities, ambassadors. And yesterday's session has been extremely interesting. But we have not heard from the representatives of the capital, so here I am. This is why I have been invited in this panel to represent the capital. What has been quite intriguing for me when we started talking about public policy, food security, and how this is impacted by geopolitics, I would like to say this. There is an aspect related to innovation. What is created inside the lab, how this goes beyond the lab, because the innovation at some point needs to find its place in the field. Because, okay, innovation might be there. This innovation might entail positive consequences for the farmer, but how can this be achieved unless it finds its way to the field, and in that way it can contribute to the development of the GDP of every country? So, over the past 30 years, as a professional, I have been doing this exact job. I have been working in multinational companies, and over the past 5 years, I went freelancing. And what do? We take various innovations born inside the laboratory, and we try to bring that innovation to the level of the producer, speaking in their own language. What is very important, because yesterday I had an interesting discussion with a gentleman. There is the following question: what's happening with startups? Why do they die? Well, I know that money is there, but we don't have enough funds. We know that money is there, but that money is channeled only to good ideas. Startups and most of innovations die at the point where they're unable to reach the farmer and speak their own language. I have seen innovations. I have seen beautiful products that when they reach the farmer asks, "Can I put that in the sprayer?" And then they're stuck, because that's the most important thing. A simple question brought forward by a farmer might kill decades of research and tens of millions that have been invested. Now, I'm here to represent oath in this particular conference. Based on my 30 years of experience, it is an amazing R&D company. We started with carbon sequestration activities, and in that way we created microbials in order to alter the soil microbiome. We collect microbia that are proliferated in the laboratory in order to create specific products that can have a positive impact on agriculture and the environment as well. Again, based on my 30-year-long experience, in the beginning, Or science would focus on chemistry. But then science moved on to explore the inside of the seed because we saw that there are different ways to approach that issue. Technology has been quite positive in increasing crops, but now there's a positive focus on soil, on the field. And now science tries to streamline soil after decades of intensive crops in order to create the right conditions inside the soil in order to improve the sequestration of carbon dioxide that is present in the air. Oath BioME is a new company. Like I discussed with numerous colleagues, and I was so happy to meet again old fellow students, so on and so forth. Now, this is an airplane that is on the air, and we're trying to assemble it, although we have been present only for a couple of years now, with amazing scientists underpinning our endeavor, who are at the same time investors. So we have a combined support of science and investors. And we also have various investors from rock stars and actors who are seeing this technology not only in function of the climate, but also in function of how we can help vulnerable areas. For example, Africa. That was all from my part. Okay, so 3 things. Either you have undergone a good training, or you are too strict with yourself, or I don't know what else, but anyway, we will listen more from you later on in the second round of statements. And I would like to congratulate you, because you were bold enough to say in a guiltful Greece of 2027 that you're here to represent the capital. Well, I don't want to disrupt the flow of that panel, but I'm not ashamed at all. What's the center of innovation around the world? Well, usually the capital is not ashamed, but they are less frank or bold than yourself. But anyway, now, we will elaborate on that. Now, let's move on now to the academia. And we know that we do not have access to what you say inside your teaching rooms, but we are here to listen to you, Professor of Environmental and Climate Physics at the National Kapodistrian University of Athens. Dr. Cartalis, you have extensive work on climate change. I know that you're a fan of that field. Now, you have the floor. The speaker's microphone is rather off. Well, yes, I am in favor of the capital of knowledge. What do we do with respect to the topic addressed here today? Well, we try to see what's going on throughout the country in order to identify the most vulnerable areas in terms of the climate crisis and its impact on the production. This is not something that is done only for this specific year. We try to opt for a more preventive approach. Which are the risks lying ahead in the next 20 years? Because we know now that science, considering the pace of development of that problem, we will see that some areas will be affected more than others. I'm talking about 2.5 risks. Drought, which is a key determinant of the wealth and well-being of an area, and the floods. And the other half factor is the flammable materials, and this is a sequelae of the drought. This is something done systematically across a scale that's quite detailed, 1/1 kilometer. And this is enough in order to see what's going on in our country today and what will emerge over the next 20 years. Mr. Drisis said earlier that they try, through the input of innovation, to detect ways in order for the climate change to, let's say, be channeled towards the most beneficial aspects, for example, for the carbon to be drawn down to the soil. We see that there are some areas in the country that are running a higher risk. Everything that is below the plain of Thessaly will have pronounced precipitation and huge problems of evaporation, meaning that more humidity will leave the soil because the temperature increases. What does it mean? It means that those areas will no longer be effective, will no longer be used in agricultural production. Absolutely not. The potential solution would be to draft a resilience plan. Which are the measures that can make that region resilient? Meaning, how can the region adapt to what is coming our way? We have been monitoring all those things for the past 25 years, and you shouldn't listen to various rumors saying that this has stopped or we no longer have that. No, there is a systematic and measurable flow of this phenomenon. So this is a risk in progress. It is not a risk that will emerge at some point in the future. What do we have to do? We need to adapt. And this adoption needs to consist of three different levels. We have the level of solution, meaning if we have an agricultural area that is susceptible to flood, you need to create banks in order for the water to be channeled away from the area. That's the short-term approach. The next level has to do with the scalable approach, meaning a mid-term horizon, and gradually you build and adopt a series of measures that will complement each other. And then we have the transformational approach, where we implement radical changes. For example, we have been talking about the plain of Thessaly. We would say that the plain is at risk, and that risk dictates the need for drilling, let's say, because the aquifer has been exhausted, because we have to protect Kala Lake, because this is also a flood protection mechanism. Those are the ways in which the governance of an area changes, because you have to reach out to the rural population, because they're at awe. They don't know what they're being faced with. So you have to tackle a situation that will drive you to the future in full safety. Is that part of our culture? Well, I'm afraid not. The culture of our country when it comes to adjustment and adoption to climate risk consists of small and fragmented measures that cannot have a proliferative effect. So if we expect to see Southern Crete, for example, transformational projects aiming at revisiting and changing infrastructure and thus changing the current planning and design for the big words, let's say, the Acheloos area. Well, I'm afraid that in that case, we cannot foresee a safe future for agriculture. At the same time, we heard earlier that we have been talking about the energy. We need to be very cautious as to how we arrange the space. Those of us who have driven from Athens to Volos, let's say, or Larissa, we have seen at Kopaida PVs in the plain, in high yield quality land. Okay, I am an advocate of RES, but we need to put them at the right place. We cannot install them on fields where we could produce food, because then we had the food security issue. And this is where the law subsumed in the need for a certain regulatory framework, because the legal framework has not always been respected. In that way, the relevant permits have been issued, but they are irregular, and we end up having such phenomena on agricultural land. So this transformation needs to respect agricultural production, the region, because it leads to social cohesion, the environment, because if you exhaust the environment, then you will end up exhausted as well, because you will not have the relevant production, and of course the imminent risk of climate crisis that leads to another priority. And add to that a realistic, reality check-based legislation. When we heard by Mr. Drisis something about the startups, he said that money is there, financial resources are there. Okay, it's true, but we don't have guarantees. And maybe tomorrow the law might change and an innovation-based investment might be compromised on the next day because the legal framework has changed. Let's assume that we were to invest in PVs in a rural area, and in 2 or 5 years the administration would come saying that no, this should not have been installed there, you should remove that. And this has an impact on the market. We see the private sector come into the university. This is why I talked about the capital of knowledge, because they're seeking advice. Will the circumstances change? I'm not talking about the financial circumstance. I'm talking about the climate circumstances, because they need to shape their strategy. So we try to offer them the data that we have, the highly reliable data. And of course, we're not there just to panic everyone that we will become a Sahara Desert. No. We see what's at stake. It's right in front of us, and our actions need to be preventive, not to be implemented a posteriori. Because if you go there, then the interventions will be more expensive and less effective. Okay, I believe that now that's an excellent pass for the continuation of our discussion, but I must say that politics could really use a man like yourself.
Αλλά δεν ακούστηκε, αν θέλετε να το πείτε φωναχτά. Λοιπόν,
May I add a thing, Sotiris, something important? Amongst other things, in the different projects of Mr. Cartalis, he is well connected with the civilization, with different cultures. I met him 15 years ago. He was the president of the Piraeus Foundation, and he remains a president there. And I believe that the Piraeus Foundation and the Piraeus Bank is doing excellent work with its different projects. Yes, indeed, he focuses on many things. Let's now visit a different professor, Dr. George Zalidis. He's a professor emeritus at Aristotle University. He's the scientific director at i-BEC. Well, I'd like to start by thanking my friend Yannis Balakakis for this meeting once again, and once again, following our meeting at the university, we talked about creating a cooperative scheme. We created the i-BEC, the Inter-Balkan Environment Center. During those years, we have reached very important remarks during all of those meetings. Yesterday, I landed in Greece, coming from the Carbon Summit. From the 23rd of October 2025, the soil monitoring law is a reality for the European Union, and our country, through the Ministry of Environment, through the i-BEC, and we've also been good partners with the Secretary General as well. We are in process of implementing this law. What have we heard from the representative of the capital, Mr. Drisis? They have created a new technology that improves the soil quality. This soil cannot itself, let's say, work on its own. It cannot improve the production on its own. We need to take into consideration all the energy factors. How can we reduce the loss of energy? This can be found at the since 2028 we should be ready to implement this new legislation. In Padova, we also had some new things happening, and Microsoft has created and developed this program. So through these new technologies, and Kostas knows this very well, the food network, food security, we've been talking about how we are going to maintain the soil. There are different things to take into consideration when talking about the soil: biodiversity, the choice of the soil, and other things. Where are we going to actually implement those systems? If we implement this new law, then the value of the soil will change. And once again, allow me to thank both Yanis and the University of AgriBusiness in Athens. We were responsible with the OPKP institution to conduct certain studies. Until last year, we collaborated with different actors, with different universities. We can measure carbon through the outer space using satellites. So we have already created in Greece, and we need the ministry to be present there. There was, of course, a comment that Greece did not have a representative at the meeting in the European Union. From the 1st of January 2028, the carbon market is taking shape. There is, of course, some things to mention. That we will move into sustainable schemes of 50,000 landfills, acres of land. How is this a living lab that we are calling in Europe, and also the producers cooperative are going to work together and collaborate? Well, our comment is that the adaptive governance should be at a state level. Should they take place at a soil level, where, of course, Europe is present? Should we take the decision based on these considerations? And allow me to end my speech here. Dear Professor, dear George, well, right now you made different things. You posed some questions, you introduced your keynote speech. Well, this whole panel has been shaped around you. But let me just say one thing. And at the next panel, we will have another Secretary General of the Ministry of Energy. And these topics you mentioned will be more present there. Maybe you should discuss things later on. We'll move on now with the Secretary General for Energy and Mineral Resources. Unfortunately, Ms. Theodora Kouloura was not able to attend. She created a short video for us, and we will present her keynote speech. She is the COO of the Cargo Group of companies.
Now, Decarbonization is a fertilizers company that produces fertilizers with a view to constantly reducing its carbon footprint through processes that are pioneering in the Greek market and the international market. Through that process, we have managed to reduce over the past 10 years its carbon footprint and the carbon footprint of its products, thus contributing to the sustainability of agricultural production, both in Greece and in the countries where we distribute our products. One of the main characteristics of Decarbonization is that right now we have the lowest carbon footprint throughout Europe, or maybe one of the lowest all around the world. How does our company achieve that? Well, through our processes. For example, constant improvement of our production processes. One of the most indicative examples is the reduction of nitrogen oxide emissions when creating nitrate acid. That's one of the lowest emissions all around the world. We also have reduced special consumption of natural gas for the production of ammonium. So this means that we have a lower production of carbon monoxide. And those two characteristics mean that our company achieves the lowest carbon footprint in ammonium production, and it also reduces our carbon footprint when processing and manufacturing nitrogen-based fertilizers. And through the process of the phosphorite contamination with sulfuric acid, I apologize, you'd realize that we can now become neutral in terms of energy consumption. And when we talk about the production of sulfuric acid, the generated power without using any fuel balances the power that needs our entire factory for the production of fertilizers. In that way, the use of electricity has zero carbon footprint on our own products. Decagro aims, apart from the various production processes, to reduce its carbon footprint across its entire farm-based production. This is achieved through bioinhibitors, and in that way, plants can absorb more fertilizers compared to the traditional amount that is used. And in that way, the emission of greenhouse gases is lower. Through those processes, Decagro has managed over the past years to have reduced carbon footprint by 30% at least across all our fertilizers, and more in the case of fertilizers that are nitrogen-based. Now, further reduction of our carbon footprint is on our agenda, and in general, the fertilizers company Decagro has brought forward this goal for the years to come, and so we believe that we will be able to further reduce our carbon footprint. Apart from that, Decagro tries to ensure that its products are sustainable, and this sustainability also has to do with other parameters. One of them being the mobilization of the plant's potential through the use of the right biostimulants. Lastly, the products of Decagro are CE certified as per the European Regulation 2019-1001, and recently had the carbon footprint of its products and its products certified, so that now we can have an official number that is cited on all our products. We believe that all farmers have realized how important it is for us to constantly reduce our carbon footprint, and we believe that they will prioritize the use of our products. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much. And it's the first time I watched that video, and I must say that maybe it's the first time we are listening to a company that does not speak about the soil, but they associate their products with the energy transition and the soil and their footprint in general. Well, I don't know whether the following crossed your mind. We have 2 male moderators, 3 other male panelists on stage, and no one prioritized the only lady. I guess you have thought of that, right? It has been her own wish, because she is the only representative of the political world. So, apart from what she has planned to share with us, she wanted to listen to all the other comments in order for her to make a statement later. This is what happened, right, Ms. Despoina Paliarouta? Yes, you are correct. This is exactly what I asked for. So, you have the floor. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. It is a great honor being with you today.
Listening to all these speakers that have so many years of experience, they are ready to conduct dialogue. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to be here with you. I wanted to listen to the opinions of the other panelists because allow me to say that I am the one who has been listening and learning from the private and the public sector, from the academic sector, and we've been listening in order to change things for the best. That's where we need to take into consideration knowledgeable people who know how things run in the market, but let us not forget that we, of course, have our own streams of gaining knowledge, but we do not know all. I represent the sector of the environment and energy, and we find ourselves at difficult times. There are many things happening around us, things that have not been expected. The data are changing, and right now we've been focusing on whether we are going to release the petrol from our country to other countries of the European Union. That's something that we've been discussing lately. One of the main focuses of our ministry is, of course, the different agreements that have been done on the different topics of the hydrocarbons, and the different agreements and understandings that have been signed for our country to provide such fuel to different countries. You will also ask me, and that's been happening lately during my talks, that we have different European goals. We want it to be more sustainable. Have we changed our targets? Well, we have a set goal to to cover 80% of our needs, or to use 30% of RES by 2030 to cover our energy needs. Well, has this changed? Well, no, but we are conducting different researches for the hydrocarbon, and we want to see what the results are going to be. It is also important to move to this way as well, and to move forward with the energy transition. We are going to accept the reduction of costs for the citizens. We're going to work towards that. We see these things and other things as complementary projects towards the energy transition. If one wants to be flexible, we need to have different and various channels for that has to do either with the energy resources or the logistics or the trade corridors, etc. So what we want to do is we do want to move towards green transition. We want clean energy. We want to be able to store energy and many more things. But at the same time, if something happens, let's say the weather is not good, it's a cloudy day, then we should be able to have alternatives. We should have security for our systems. Another thing I wanted to mention, I was happy to hear from Mr. Drisis that there is money available. From our side, we see this as a challenge because we have noticed there are a lot of needs. There are needs in the food production sector. We also have to tackle climate crisis, the increasing temperatures, different weather phenomena, floods. We as a state are being called up to cover all of these, what's been happening, and we've been called to reduce the cost of energy for the farmers, to design different strategies and policies to reduce the costs for many different sectors. So, as I said, there are many different needs, uncountable, and but the money is limited. How are we going to do this? We will be using our national, of course, sources. We'll use all the European money funding, for example, from the ERRF and from the Recovery and Resilience Fund. And we will use this wisely. For example, different programs for the reduction of the energy cost, for the green transition. We heard about the innovation project. I was really happy to hear about all of those things. We heard about entrepreneurship project, educational project. All of these and many more need money. It is not easy to universally cover all the needs. Allow me to say that energy, it is an invisible but decisive weapon. From the farm to the fork, each level, each stage is depending from the from energy. All stages, the production, the collection, the logistics, the selling. We need to add this into a procedure, control them, and streamline them. We have done many things. Have we done everything? No, we haven't done everything. And I'd like to ask you to join us at an open dialogue in order to find out which are the different measures and distinctive measures we should to tackle these issues. We heard some things about photovoltaics. we said that, for example, for a farmer, the farmers will be able to use their lands not only to produce, but also to use RES for their production in order for the producer, the farmer, to have a lower energy costs or give this power back to the grid. And in order to do that and decide that, we held a meeting and we called different actors, farmers, producers, different photovoltaic companies. And what we found out is that we should be more strict. The photovoltaic shouldn't be used at high productivity farmland. That is something that we took into consideration. A new legislation is on your way. That is everything I had to say. Thank you. In order to restore the structure and the balance of this panel, I would like to ask all of you, because you can see the clock running. Please take into consideration that the time to answer a question will be a lot less than the time for your first remarks. What is going to happen to the energy sector if we combine this with the reduction of the production cost? Mr. Cartalis talked about this. He's not a romantic. He spoke about Copaída Lake. One would say that you should add more restrictions on the use of photovoltaics or RES in such areas. Is this viable? Because there are people who would say, I will just rent my land and do nothing else. This is on the discussion table. We want to examine if we're going to implement more restrictions. Our ministry has a lot of different requests, and that's what we've been examining. For example, regarding the batteries, the cost of the batteries, how to store energy. As time goes by, these systems become have a lower price. But the Ministry of Agricultural Production, that is part of our government, it's been asked to add more restrictions, to be stricter with our legislation in this framework. I cannot say what our final decisions will be. So, are you going to be stricter? I'm not answering this. I'm just saying that it is being discussed. Can you now tell us whether energy transition will help us take a breather? Will this reduce the production cost? Will this benefit towards the adaptation to the energy transition?
Well, yes, but the government has accepted some of those requests, but not all of them. Well, I'm afraid that if we had farmers among us, they would disagree. Well, yes, I realize that, but this is a reality. When it comes to the energy transition in that particular sector, we believe that it will reduce production costs, mainly through three different pillars. One is the decentralized energy production. Solutions such as PV on farmland can be used because they can also generate their own RES-based energy. And the program run in that case. And sometimes you should know that, okay, we might receive many requests, but when the programs run, we don't have the same demand. We received 3,500 requests, and all of them received the green light. But then not all of them proceeded. We had a framework for PVs on farmland following extensive consultation, but when the programs are implemented, we don't see the relevant response that we had anticipated. Decentralized production, PVs, and in general RES-based systems, installation, including net metering schemes. And this allows for farmers to be more independent in terms of volatile prices and the power price ranges. Another solution would be, in areas where this is feasible, to proceed with using geothermy, when there is this potential, of course. Geothermy is a source of energy which is constant, it never ends, and it has a similar profile to the profile of the farming needs. A third thing, grids, networks. We want to have comprehensive structures. We cannot have lower energy costs and lower cost of production unless we have grids that are resilient and interconnections that can guarantee constant supply of power with no interruptions and no cutbacks. Now, we have, apart from finding the resources, we have to simplify the licensing procedures, which is very important. And that will be a significant first step. For example, in the case of RES permitting, licensing processes, the relevant time has decreased. And we want to further reduce licensing for RES. And the whole process becomes digital. There is a form where digitally, from a single point, we will be able to keep track of our requests. And I would like to say that we have a clear goal. We need to move towards green transition without, however, that impeding the stability or jeopardizing the stability of the system, because when we have an extensive transformation, you do realize at the same time you implement things while you are trained. So we, as a state, try to guarantee the resilience, predictability and sustainability of those systems. Dear Yannis, well, I would like to say the following. There was a statement that the farmers are not represented here, but we have the ATHEAS, the National Union of Agricultural Cooperatives, is here. So during the Q&A session, he will provide his own input. Now, at this point, I would like to address a question to Mr. Drisis. My dear Dimitris, from what I heard, based on what you described about oaths actions, you are opting for a soft launching in Europe through Athens. Thank you for your trust. At the same time, much work has been done in Africa. And we have to admit that we at AgriBusiness have not dared to approach that issue yet. Maybe because considering the representation of African countries in Greece, especially in the areas where we see most of the potential, I'm afraid we don't have a representation. It is clear that sometimes questions are being raised, and we want to raise that as well. Maybe it's time we opened up new channels in the AgriBusiness Forum. Maybe we could dedicate a chapter to Africa, and we will consider that with the scientific group. We are trying to explore that option as well. So can we be more practical as to what oath does? At the level of Europe, we talk about soft launch. I believe that in Africa, where the terrain is quite difficult and challenging, things have to be approached differently. Well, I would like to focus on 3 points. Let me get back to the capital, which is the favorite topic of discussion. Our investors said that one of the main aspects of technology that they would like to use for the common good, and for the common good, well, you do realize that investors usually tend to focus on Africa. Me and Mr. Fatiu had a very interesting conversation this morning in the shuttle bus about what's going on in those countries and how farming is developed there, and whether the lack of funding, the needs for fertilizers and extreme weather conditions do not allow smaller farms make ends meet. So one of the first goals at the company, considering that we have important investors who are celebrities, let's say, Sotiris is trying to push himself in order not to ask who. Go ahead. Anyway, now, we have focused on Africa with an office at Rwanda, and over there we have been using this know-how in small farms that do not have fertilizers, do not have an irrigation system. They have to deal with extreme weather conditions, and the crops is only there to feed the farmer's family. So OATH established offices at Rwanda in order to focus on the sub-Saharan Africa, in order to deliver on their promises to the founders. And when it comes to Europe, we saw that Europe is an attractive market, but at the same time, given that I have worked for American companies, I have to tell you that the Americans cannot understand what's going on in Europe when you have to drive 4, 5, 6 hours in order to visit the area and speak 6 different languages in between. So they focus on certain crops in order to carry out the soft launch. Raquel is my colleague. She is here with us, and they are located at Spain. Spain is a country that has high-intensity agriculture, especially in the southern part, where most of the greenhouses are located. And given that the discussion I had with the vice president of the company has been quite interesting, and he's a former colleague and family friend for the past 30 years, and he said that, okay, you're speaking that language, so it's good to have that implemented in Greece. And I said, I would be glad to return to Greece. I realize all those problems. I might be blamed that this is not my daily life, so I don't have first-hand knowledge. But on the other hand, I see Greece, which is a blessed country, with so many blessings in terms of its life, way of living, land. Greece is a country full of potential, in agriculture among others. Therefore, soft launching, like you said, my dear Yanis, yes, this is what we're trying to do here. But you skipped another question about the celebrities that support your work. What you described is quite emotional, really, because someone might be trying to grow a plant, have crops, but then they have extreme weather conditions and everything is doomed, and you exhibit this solidarity, but maybe, well, I want to be quite discreet with names, but we know that this is publicly available information. We have 2 rock stars, Born and X from U2, who are the main shareholders. We have other private equities that operate in the field of development and growth in small farmland and small holdings in Africa. And we also have Edward Norton, the famous actor, you know him, David Matthews, who is another rock star. So right now, there are 2 ongoing discussions that will be announced as of June. We have 2 big foundations that have to do with people involved in the arts. So we see that we have strong presence of private equities that focus on developing countries and markets, and at the same time we have people from the arts sector that underpin our effort. This is not a profit matter, it's a matter of offering. Yes, well, yes, we're a public benefit company. Well, public benefit company might mean many things. But Bono and Edge from U2 have also announced other similar collaborations because they want to support that cause. Well, I would like to, I know that you are a man with humor and you go beyond formalities, so I would like to encourage you when you participate in PAL, you need to have your name, your capacity, and also write representative of the capital written just underneath. That will be quite eloquent of yourself. Now, Mr. Cartalis. Let's now talk about what you said earlier. You talked about various areas, you talked about Thessaly in collaboration with Genesis. You have also launched an evidence-based and rather ominous perspective model regarding what will happen in 20, 30 years with Thessaly. If we're alive then and we get to a point where we'll be able to witness that development. And we also heard things about the sub-Saharan area. Mr. Drisis talked about the implementation of their program. So maybe we will live to experience such circumstances. We know that the state receives such information. Have we seen anything happening towards this direction? Or maybe the state turns a blind eye on that and they say, okay, let's do that, let's leave that for the next ones. Well, time is not an ally in that case, because correct information is a reliable information. We will not turn into Sahara Desert. If you listen to colleagues and journalists talking about Sahara, you should know that this is rather a communication trick. No. They're just trying to intimidate people, and they make scientists look unreliable. But this is not the case. There are some circumstances and risk factors that call for adjustments. How are we going to deal with the imminent drought? How are we going to deal with floods? And we see floods happening more frequently, being more severe, more intense. All those things have been answered by representatives of the soil management works, and those things move on, but at a lower pace than they should. And the state has to undertake the relevant initiatives. Those plans are plans that should be performed in synergy with the local societies. Like Yorga said before, those are the people working in the fields, struggling to keep agriculture alive. But I don't want to be misunderstood. When I talked about PVs, I did not talk about the agrivoltaics that the Secretary General talked about. They say, yes, I produce clean energy in the agricultural field, but we have PVs that are located on top, above the soil, meaning that it cools down the soil temperature, and this means that the soil surface is more productive. Yes, this can happen, but the problem in that case is something we heard from the Secretary General. Of course, I'm not critical towards her, but we have seen that this administration is not on the same page. We have the Minister of Rural Development saying this, but the Minister of Energy might say the other thing. So we might have a third input as well. So there's not a shared narrative. Of course, we want to move towards clean energy. That's the goal of our country. It has been voted, and this has a specific time horizon up to 2050. But we need to see where agriculture will rely in. And let me link that to what Mr. Drisis said before about investments and safety in the capital. Mr. Polisos knows that in Thessaly we have 38,000 streamers covered by PVs. The licenses that have been granted for the future talk about 347,000 stremas, 8.5% of the farmland of Thessaly. And at some point, the state will go and tell the investors, your investment is over, your time is over, and they will force the investors to remove them. You have had a guaranteed income for the past 20 years, but this no longer happens because we have another part of the Greek administration that they, for example, they wrongfully granted more licenses. And this is where we will get to what Mr. Drisis talked about when he talked about insecurity of investments and precarious investments. So this will also have an impact on energy and the farmers and the agricultural world, and will also generate other problems at the local level. Well, you know, we live in Athens, and those of us who work for public entities, we feel like everything needs to be solved centrally. But it is the local level that needs to step in that case, because they have a better overview of the problem. And this makes far more sense. Let me get back to the climate risks, Mr. Paliarouta. I insist that the adoption and adjustment plans need to be drafted. They will be drafted in order to limit and reduce the cost of production, and this needs to be combined with land reallocation schemes and land redistribution schemes. So we might have a holding. How many? 10? 10 hectares, you said? Okay, the European average is, well, might be 10 stremas, not 10 hectares. Well, anyway, the European average is 100 stremas. What does it mean? Well, it means that the different economies of scale are being created. A 10 strema holding owner, how can they meet the requirements for CO2 reduction, for fertilizers, for crop rotation, for anything else? How can the soil absorb and draw more carbon down to the soil? And I would like to conclude by saying that in the case of radical changes, we also need to consider how local administration could be more effective. The Secretary General has a privilege of being at the Ministry of Environment and Energy. Maybe this is where the agriculture should be subject to, because in that way we will no longer see those contradictory phenomena, things that we have been seeing for many decades now. And in that way the farmers will have all the tools they need in order to grow their crops safely, and maybe also increase their revenue and have an incentive to stay in the rural areas, because without agriculture the rural areas will perish, will die. And that's a key characteristic that has nothing to do with energy, innovation or the climate. There's no life, no opportunities in the rural area. Those of you who stay in rural areas, you know that those areas are being deserted by everyone. This is inextricably linked to whether someone has incentive and the means to stay there and grow their holding and crops. So we need a perspective that needs to be claimed for everyone. Either we represent academia or production or administration, like the Secretary General. I believe that the will has been invented. All we have to do is to have that role in a different way. Ms. Paliarouta has been taking notes, so I guess in the last round she will also say a few words, and that round will be far quicker.
Well, he is always full of information. Now let's move to Yorgos, because I want to make sure that there will be a QA session. You will have 3 minutes, but I know you have a wide variety of topics to discuss, like from spectrum analysis. And I know this because we've been cooperating with the Agricultural University of Athens. And I would like to hear your statement for the second round in order to open the QA and then proceed to the closing remarks. I will just comment on something Kostas said for the agri-food chain, the policy for the agricultural land. What's happening with the land uses? We have different directives that's been published. We cannot use this directive when we are working with the policies, when we are working with 10 stremas. How are we going to reduce our carbon footprint? We need to take into consideration the 50,000 stremas in clustering. This is the result we got from the Agricultural University of Athens. For the policies of agricultural land use, needs to be considered. We need to consider this based on the use, not on the ownership. The basic thing I want to make my statement on is the business model. What I lived yesterday, experienced the other days in Padova at the Carbon Summit. We saw some carbon silos. The Ms. von der Leyen said we need to invest 15% of the next CAP in order for the agricultural business model to mobilize different things. I am not a specialist on financial matters, but how are we going to set this up? The reduced carbon footprint and turn it into value, and how Greece is going to prepare itself for the carbon market, the stock market. I'm not sure how this is going to happen, but it is important to happen. Well, thank you for keeping it short. You are always been very relevant with everything you comment. The biggest thing is, of course, the council market, the contribution of agriculture in the stock market, and how the industry is going to benefit from the decarbonization in order to pay the industry, the farming industry, and implement and introduce different things. And now let's move to the final round and move to the questions. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question, pose a question? Please just introduce yourselves first and foremost and pose the question. We don't want to hear any statements. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Sotiris Platas. I'm CEO of Centaur, company from Volos. Just a question for the Secretary General based on two things that our two professors mentioned. One has to do with the voluntary carbon credits that's going to open in 2028. That's a huge opportunity. And the next thing you mentioned that is being handled from the two ministries. For example, the carbon footprint of the agriculture industry and the carbon credits. Is there anything being planned on those two things? How Greece is going to take advantage of this opportunity? This question is for the Secretary General. And to keep things short, just on the solutions, an idea could be that the large carbon emitters is that they buy those credits instead of having to buy the licenses to keep polluting. Thank you for your question. Let's move to the next question, and you could comment on all the questions. Good morning. I am Yanis Moratidis. I'm a journalist, and I'd like to ask you, Do you think that we are out of topic when we're talking about the carbon footprint in 2026? Based on that, we're seeing the geopolitical changes that even the European Union is concerned for. That is something that has been discussed 20 years ago, like we discussed 20 years ago for the first time regarding the climate change. And now the microphone to Nego. And let's see if there's the third question to combine all of them.
Şerifoğlu, and I'm coming from European Environment Agency. So my question is to Dr. Constantinos. I'm sorry.
Cartalis.
Where do you draw the line between the short-term protection and transformational change in the flood-prone regions, and what data allows you to make that shift early enough to preventive rather than reactive? And the second question is about the you also suggested some disconnection, and you also suggested that the ministry and regarding the policy-wise, you should have a perspective. So what do you think about the miscoordination, or what kind of incentives is missing? Thank you very much. These questions for both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bengu.
Αν δεν έχουμε άλλο ερώτημα.
Άλλη ερώτηση υπάρχει?
Are there any other questions? Bengu comes from the European Organization of the Environment in Copenhagen. Thank you for being with us. And I believe the Secretary General should start answering some of the things that have been asked. Let's start with what's been asked during the panel. I would like Ms. Paliarouta to answer a bit slowly so that the interpreters can work properly. I've heard many things, and I heard the same question coming from the panel and from the audience. What is going to happen with the carbon market? When I first spoke, I spoke about photovoltaics and high productivity farmland. I mentioned that one could have a dual use of land in order not only to produce food, but also to produce energy. We are working very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture. Our policies are not contrasting. We are taking into consideration the different opinions of the producers and, of course, the consumers. Many times we have dual demands. So some people visit both ministries, and they express different opinions to each ministry. It is very hard to work on both those things. We have already implemented different measures, and we have a common policy for the agricultural people. Are there any things to improve? Yes, of course. We want to open the flow for everyone, to hear everyone, the producers of food, the producers of energy, in order to reach the best result possible to optimize the environment. So there is a streamlined conversation between the ministries, between the Secretary General, and with Mr. Varilidis, who is the Secretary General for the Ministry of the Environmental Committee. We are there to take advantage of this opportunity that's been given with the carbon market, and we are working closely with Mr. Varilidis, myself on the energy sector, and himself at the environmental sector. Let me see my notes. I will also agree with Mr. Cartalis that there have been a lot of licenses granted and different terms of connection to the managers and administrations. Some investors have seen that their investments are not profitable enough. And we've reached the point where all the cutdowns that have been happened are not feasible for them to invest. During 2026, there are going to the first megawatts for storing of power are going to be installed. Hedno has also projects for storing energy of 4 gigawatt in total. This is a reality of how fast things are happening or not. Right now, we are in the way of introducing and installing different storage measures and installations in order to make things easier and make the system more stable. Were there any other questions? I'm not sure if I noted down everything. Mr. Muratidis also raised another question, and I would like to comment on it myself. You said how viable is it to conduct a discussion regarding the carbon market. The AgriBusiness Forum since 2018 is here to open the dialogue channels to bring people together from all sectors, the triple helix, so to say, the economy, the production, and the public and private sector. That is actually, we are discussing about things that are happening and are going to happen tomorrow. The AgriBusiness Forum is not here to create certain policy or move towards politics. The conclusions that have been made every time are conclusions that the more than 8,000 participants have drawn, and we are responsible to pass on these remarks and statements to the government and the institutions, and now it is their responsibility. Each time it's their responsibility on how to use them. What Mr. Zalidis said regarding the European directive that will need to be implemented in the national legislation till 2028, and ourselves, in cooperation with the different actors, the Agricultural University of Athens as well, who hosts this event, will be responsible for drawing the remarks of this year's forum as well, and these will be passed on to the responsible policy makers of the state. Having said all that, I don't think it's irrelevant to discuss things that do actually influence our lives. And what we heard yesterday from the representative of the FAO He talked about food, and this needs to be considered as one of the three strategic materials: energy, raw materials, and food. That is something that I really wanted to answer, and this question concerns not only this panel, but all panels. Now you have the floor, Mr. Polizos. Mr. Cartalis, would you like to answer?
Η εκτίμηση του κλιματικού κινδύνου γίνεται.
Well, like I said, we're trying to assess the climate through the IPCC and the European Environmental Agency and UCRA. So you'd realize that we rely our measurements on the various climate simulations. And so we consider what has been generated by the European body, and we try to adapt that to the local and regional areas, because we realize that slope of the soil or soil coverage are not the same factors across all areas. We might have environmental indices that are the same, but the rest is not. So this is how we calculate the vulnerability and the risk at the end. Now, when it comes to collaboration with the ministries, I believe the Secretary General answered. She said that efforts are being made no matter what the country administration is. And I believe that we're always judged based on what we deliver. The gentleman at the back is a journalist, if I remember correctly. Now, he said that it might be oxymoron to say that we are building adjustment plans for the next 20 years. But think, how close 2025 was yesterday. So if you are here in order to draft a concerted, structured, calculated, risk-based plan for 2045 is what you should do. Because if you look back at 2005, you will see that all the assessments back then that would emerge in 2025 were confirmed. And the actual values were higher than the anticipated ones. Now, international environment, you're right, is creating various problems, especially United States. And this summit in Brazil, where the US did not participate, well, you do realize that they were holding the key role because they were absent. And we had various other countries that could not focus on the carbon sequestration or decarbonization policies. Yes, it's true, things are more difficult, apparently. This is obvious, and this is why the European Union, which is the highly institutional system focusing on climate change, has made some amendments in order to preserve the competitiveness of our industry and at the same time protect the European climate system. Therefore, this is not an easy task. We have various things that cannot be foreseen. Allow me to add something more. You talked about carbon credits. The Scientific Committee of the European Union for Climate Change, where I am a member, has issued a conclusion about the future of agriculture in times of climate change. One of the proposals is the one you mentioned. When an agricultural body, when the agricultural world manages to reduce emissions, then that right of emission should be bought by someone who works in a similar field, rather than buying that royalty from a different industry, let's say steel. So we will have a fund of royalties that will have an inner cycle of replenishment. And if organized correctly, then that would be to the benefit of the agricultural world. And that was the good news, that the same report says that the agricultural world needs to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 30%, because they generate substantial amounts of carbon. So we are being faced with a challenge and an obligation at the same time. And then this obligation can be compensated. I apologize, Mr. Palizas. I will conclude with that point. The statement mentions that this will be linked to the CAP, meaning that high polluting holdings will not receive the same extent of subsidy from the CAP. So you see that there will be a reciprocity approach. And this will have an impact on how productive those holdings are. Of course, I fully agree with the Secretary General in terms of energy storage. It is true that this will revolutionize clean energy demand in our country, because we will be able to store energy. Today it's a sunny day, tomorrow it will not be a sunny day. Today we have wind, tomorrow we don't have any. And in that way our islands will be independent. We'll have clean energy. And we also have the goal for 2050 that appears to be long or very far away, but it's not. Thank you. Thank you. You have all been amazing. Ms. Paliarouta, thank you so much. Mr. Drisis, Mr. Cartalis, Mr. Zalidis, thank you so much for your interventions. Of course, Ms. Kulura for the video message. I would like to congratulate you, because, you know, we come to find something ready. And in order to come across something that is ready, not only Yanis Balakakis, but he is the head, so I'd like to congratulate him, because we see something that has been put together quite beautifully, creating those important panels and selecting all the members with such caution and care. We arriving here with so much interest and carefree, tired by other things, and not what's happening here. Well, I believe that's important. And this will bring us to 2050. That's the 8th forum. Yes, it's the 8th international. The 30th in general. It's the 8th international. I would like to thank you, my dear satyrs, but I would like to say that in order to get to that point today, we have had to tackle numerous crises. We have had to deal with so many things at the same time and not have that result. Of course, I have to thank my team, a very strong and robust collaboration that we have with the Agricultural University of Athens. Many things have already been mentioned at the beginning of that chapter. So, all those things in collaboration with our supporters and sponsors, because we should not overlook that. This is not something that can be financed or funded. It does not meet anyone's interests. I thank them all, because it's thanks to them that we were able to stay here. Now, break. Now, we have a 30-minute break. The next panel will start at 3:15. We will grab a bite and then we will continue. Thank you.